We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Hey Amid Beis in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 35b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara said that if it would not have written in the pasuk that women are included in all of the halachas of kofar, so I might have thought that ish debar mitzvahs, in that when it comes to a man who's part of mitzvahs in general, he has more mitzvahs than a woman, so he's part of the halachas of kofar, meaning to say if a shor muad kills a man, so then there's a payment of kofar, but isha lo, but I would have said by a woman maybe that's not the case. V'yashmin anhan, if I would have only learned the halacha over here, meaning in this case, by the case of kofar, that women are included, mishum de'ika ibud neshama, because over there there's a loss of life involved, chas rachmana Allah, so the Torah has mercy on her, aval hanachtarti emulo, but in the other two cases I would say maybe women are not included, meaning when it comes to onshin and when it comes to dinei mamanis, and so therefore tzricha, that's why all the psukim are necessary. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Chutz mi bal takif u bal tashchis v'chulu," except for the prohibition of rounding the corner of one's hair and destroying the beard. That does not apply to women. And the Mishnah goes on to say that also the halachas of tumah that apply to kohanim, that applies to male kohanim. It does not apply to women. And the Gemara says, "B'shlama bal tatamei l'meisam." I understand the prohibition for a kohen, that a kohen's not allowed to become tamei meis. Tichsiv, as it's written, "Emor la kohanim b'nei Aaron." It says, "Say to the kohanim, the sons of Aaron." And we learn out b'nei Aaron v'lo b'nos Aaron, the sons of Aaron and not the daughters of Aaron. That's how we understand that women do not have the prohibition of becoming tamei meis. But the Gemara continues, Ela bal takif u bal tashchis, but when it comes to the prohibition of rounding the corners of the head, cutting the payas, and the prohibition of destroying the beard, minolan, from where do we know that that applies to men and not to women? And the Gemara answers, Dechsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, Lo sakifu pas roshchem v'lo sashchis eis pas zekonech. It says you can't round the corners of your head and you can't destroy the corners of your beard. And we understand as follows, Kol sheyeshno b'hashchasa, anybody who is included in the prohibition of destroying the beard, yeshno b'hakaf is also included in the prohibition of rounding the corners of one's head. V'hani nashin, when it comes to these women, hoel v'lo isnu b'hashchasa, since the prohibition of hashchasa, of destroying the beard, does not apply to women, lesnu b'hakaf, so also the prohibition of rounding the corners of one's head, that also does not apply to women. But the Gemara says, but how do we know, from where do we know, that the destroying of the beard, that prohibition does not apply to women? And the Gemara says, you could say that it's logical to halo islu zaken because they don't have a beard. And the Gemara continues, and if you want, I could say another answer, kra, it's really a pasuk. Diamar kra, because the pasuk says, lo sakifu pas roshchem, velo sa'ashches eis pas zekonecha. It says, don't round the corners of your head. And then it says, don't destroy the corners of your beard. But midashani kra b'diburi, but the pasuk changes its language. Because if the language was going to be consistent, it said pas roshchem, so it should have said pas zekanchem, that's in the plural. My zekanecha, why does it say zekanecha in the singular? Zekancha velo zekanishtacha. What it means is your beard and not the beard of your wife, and that's where we learn out that the prohibition of hashchasa does not apply to women, and so too the prohibition of bal takif, that also does not apply to women. But the Gemara continues, v'lo, but does the prohibition not apply to women when it comes to the prohibition of destroying the beard? V'atanya, but what about that which we learned in the following brisa? It says, Zekan isha v'hasaris, if you have a beard of a woman or a beard of a eunuch, shehelu sar, that they have hair, even though they normally don't grow beards, but let's say they do have a beard, harehen kizakin l'chol divreim, so that's considered like a regular beard in terms of all halachas. And so therefore that sounds like they are included. My love, is it not lahashchasa? Aren't we saying that by the Zekan isha, that by the beard of a woman there is a prohibition of hashchasa, there's a prohibition to destroy the beard? Isn't that exactly what this brisa is saying? And the Gemara says, no, Amar Abaya says, L'hashchasa lo motzes amr. You can't possibly say that this brisa is talking about the prohibition of destroying the beard. That cannot apply to women. The Yolif pa'as mi b'nei Aaron, because we learn it out, it's a gzer shaveh. It says the same halacha by the b'nei Aaron, by the sons of Aaron. It also says not to destroy the beard, and we learn out a gzer shaveh, pa'as from there. Ma'alahala noshim peturos, just like over there, certainly women are exempt. That's a halacha only by the b'nei Aaron, the sons of Aaron, and not by the women. So afkan, so too over here, nashim peturo, so too over here, the women are patur. So we learn out from the repetition of the prohibition by the b'nei Aaron that clearly excludes women. But the Gemara says, but if you're already saying that when it says the words B'nai Aaron, the sons of Aaron, that's what we're understanding it to mean, the sons of Aaron and not the daughters of Aaron. But if that's going on everything in that parsha, including the destruction of the beard, so nishto kramine, so then you don't even need a pasuk, you don't need a gezerah shaveh. V'tesid b'kal v'chomer, we can do a kal v'chomer from Kohanim. V'yano amina, I can say as follows. Uma kohanim sheriba behem hakasav mitzvahs yaseris. If when it comes to the kohanim, where the kohanim have many extra mitzvahs, b'nei Aaron v'lo b'nos Aaron, and yet we say that when it comes to the destruction of the beard, it applies only to the sons and Aaron of Aaron and not the daughters of Aaron. So Yisrael lo kol shekain. So certainly by Yisrael, it will not apply to the women. And the Gemara answers, Ilav Gezei Rashava, if not for the Gezei Rashava of Pa'as, so Havamina, so actually I might have thought, Hifsika Inyan, I might have thought there actually is an interruption when it's talking about the Bnei Aaron over there. Maybe that's only going on the halacha of Tumas Meis, it's not going on the halacha of the destruction of the beard, and that's why we need the Gezei Rashava to say that even the halacha of the destruction of the beard, that prohibition, that applies to Bnei Aaron and not Benos Aaron, and the Gezei Rashava tells us that's also true in general, it applies to men and not to women. But the Gemara says, 1 second, Hashtanami Nemo Hifsika Inyan. But now also, even if you have the Gzeira Shava, why can't we say that there's an interruption in terms of the topic? Maybe Bnei Aaron is only going on the prohibition of becoming Tamei Meis. V'imishum Gzeira Shava, and if you're going to say, well, if that's the case, then what's the purpose at all of the Gzeira Shava? If we're going to say that Hifsika Inyan, if we're going to say that the halacha Bnei Aaron does not apply to the halacha of the destruction of the beard, so what do we need the Gzeira Shava for? But we do need the Gzeira Shava. Mi boile, we could use it for the following. We need it for the following. L'chidatanya, for the following brisa. Lo yigalechu. It says lo yigalechu. That's the prohibition of the shaving of the beard by kohanim. So yachol gilchu b'misparayim yichayev. Now, from the way it's phrased over there, I might think that if a person uses a scissors, it's also chayev in that case by the beard. Talmud lomar lo sashchis. So the pasuk says lo sashchis. That's what it says by the general prohibition by Yisrael. And yachol liktu b'malkeit overhitni yichayev. But I might think from lo sashchis that even if the person uses a tweezer, or let's say he uses small planes, so also that there would be a chiyuv. Talmud lomar lo yigalechu. So the pasuk says by the kohanim lo yigalechu, and so essentially we compare the two. The Gzeira Shav is saying that the terminology that we use by the general case by Yisraelim and the terminology that we use by kohanim, we have to combine them, and we say as follows: Haketzad, how so? What is the nature of the prohibition? Giluach sheyesh bo hashchasa. When it comes to the destruction of the beard, the prohibition is you're not allowed to shave the beard in a destructive manner. Haveyomer zetar, and we understand that to mean a tar. You're not allowed to use a razor. That's how we learn out that the prohibition is specifically by a razor. And so that's what the Gzeira Shava could be for. And we could say Hifsik Inyan, we could say the Bnei Aaron, V'lo Benos Aaron, doesn't go on this halacha of the shaving of the beard. But the Gemara says, Im Kain, if so, if that's all we're learning out from the Gzeira Shava, Nichtov Kra Eis Sheb Bizikanecha, the Pasuk could have just said, Eis Sheb Bizikanecha, and we still could have learned out the exact same halachas. My Pa'az Zikanecha, why does it say Pa'az Zikanecha? Shma Mino Tarti. So therefore you see both halachas. You see the halacha of Bnei Aaron v'lo benos Aaron, you see it doesn't apply to women, and you also see this halacha of giluach sheyesh ba'ashchasa, that the prohibition is specifically by a tar, by a razor. But the Gemara says, V'alohadatanya, but still going back to the brisa we had before, what about that brisa we had before? Zakan ho'isha v'asoris, shehelu sa'ar harein kizokin l'chol devreim. We said that by the beard of a woman or the beard of a eunuch, let's say there's hair over there, it's treated like a beard in terms of all halachas, l'ma hilchasa. So for what halacha are we talking about if we're not talking about the halacha of shaving the beard? And the Gemara says, Amar Mar Zutra says, l'tumas negoim, we're talking about the halacha of tumas negoim. The halachas of negoim of tzaras are different when it comes to, let's say you have a tzaras on the skin or a tzaras on the beard, and we're saying that halacha of tumas negoim by women, let's say the woman has a beard, it would be the same as if it was a tzaras by a beard that was a beard of a man. But the Gemara says tumas negoim behed yaksiva, but the halacha of tumas negoim, that's right in the pasuk. The pasuk says we treat the beard of a woman the same as a man. It says v'isha isha. It says a man or a woman kiyeh bo nega berosh or bezakin. It says that there's a nega on the rosh, on the head, or on the zakin, or on the beard. And so we wouldn't need a brisa to teach us something that's explicit in the pasuk. And so the Gemara says elo amar Mar Zutra, rather Mar Zutra says litaras negoim. We're talking about the purification of tzaras. By the purification, there's a halacha of shaving, and that halacha in terms of the shaving of the beard is going to apply to women the same as men. And the Gemara says taras negoim nami pshita, but isn't the purification of negoim, isn't that also obvious that it should be the same? Kevon de bas tuma he bas tahara he, since already you're saying the beard has the same halachas in terms of tuma, wouldn't it have the same halachas in terms of tahara? But the Gemara answers itzrich. The Gemara says really the brisa is necessary because salkadai dechamina, because I might have thought litzdadim ksiv, that you can read the pasuk litzdadim, meaning to say not every term in the pasuk is going on ish and isha. You could read the pasuk isha kiyevo nega berosh, means to say a man or a woman if they have tzaras on the rosh on the head. O bezakan hadar asan leish, and when it says o bezakan or the beard, that's not going on a woman. You could have said that part of the pasuk is just going on a man. That's what you could have said, and therefore kamash malon. That's what the Bryce is teaching us, that part of the pasuk goes on women as well. The halachas of negoim apply to women as well. And Rashi explains, Imkain, if so, the Gemara was saying that if you're going to say that the reason why we have this Gezerah Shav is only to teach us the halacha of Giluach Sheyesh Ba'ashchasa, the Lahachi Uda'asa, that that's all the pasuk, that's all the Gezerah Shav is coming for. So Nichtov Eis She B'Zikanecha could have just written Eis She B'Zikanecha. The Havalei Nami Kamandach Sipeya, that's already the equivalent of writing Peya, of creating that Gezerah Shav, to Aksib Peya Ba'ukra, because it does say the word Peya anyway in the pasuk, Gabe Rosh, by the head of the person. When we have by saying sheb bizikanecha instead of just eis zikanecha, shma mino peya. You see, that's going on the word peya as well. It would be going on that word peya to create that gezerah shava for this halacha of giluach sheyesh bo ashchasa. V'achi kamer lo sashches peyos sheb bizikanecha v'hadar neilaf giluach da ashchasa bepaas paas yisrael mikohanim. We can learn out this halacha of giluach of ashchasa again from the gezerah shava of paas paas. You wouldn't need the actual word paas. Inami b'vinyanav chaye pas zakan b'kohanim v'chaye pas zakan b'Yisrael. Even if you're not doing a gezerah shava, you can do it as a binyanav. We learn it out by kohanim, so too by Yisrael. So my paas. So why does it say the word paas? Shma mino tarti. So the Gemara said it teaches us both halachas. Not only does it teach us the halacha of giluach sheyesh bo ashchasa, it also teaches us that it's going that the words bnei Aaron, and we say only the sons of Aaron, not the daughters of Aaron. That's going on the entire inyan because they reshava shlema limercha akasav af l'chol. It's going on everything in the topic. Even the halachas of the shaving of the beard, they apply to men and not to women. And the Gemara continues, isi tani in the Braisa, af bal yikrachu nashim peturos, even the prohibition against tearing one's hair out. This is talking about tearing one's hair out over a mace because of the grief when somebody dies. Even that women are patur, they're not part of that prohibition. And the Gemara says, my time at the isi, what is the reason of isi? The darish hachi, he darshans as follows. The pasuk says, "Bonim atem laHashem Elokechem." You are sons to Hashem. Lo tiskodadu. You shouldn't cut yourself. V'lo tasimu karcha beinei nechem l'meis. And you shouldn't again make a bald spot, tear out hair because of a mace, because of the grief over the dead. Ki am kadosh ato laHashem Elokecha. Because you're a holy nation to Hashem. And we understand that to mean bonim v'lo bonos. We understand that to mean sons. It says bonim atem laHashem Elokechem, sons and not daughters. They're not included in the prohibition in terms of tearing out their hair. The Gemara says, La karcha ata omer, you're saying that it refers to karcha, you're saying it refers to baldness. La karcha oeino el legedida, you're saying it's to baldness and not to gedida. The pasuk also mentions lo tisgodu, you're not supposed to cut yourself. Maybe when it says you're not supposed to cut yourself, that's going on men and not women. How do you know that it's going on the prohibition of the tearing out of the hair? And the Gemara says, Kishuomer ki am kadosh atol Hashem Elokecha. When the pasuk finishes and says, because you're a holy nation to Hashem your God, hare gedida omer. That pasuk, that part of the pasuk is saying that the prohibition to cut yourself is already being stated to be included of the whole nation. That includes the entire nation, men and women. Hamani mekayim bonim v'lo bonos. So therefore, how do I fulfill the pasuk, sons and not daughters? Lakarcha, that's talking about the prohibition in terms of tearing out of the hair. And the Gemara continues, Umari yisel rabos es hagedida lahotzi es hakarcha. But how do you know to include the cutting of the skin and to exclude the tearing out of the hair? Mar ben nias hagedida, the Gemara explains that we include gedida sheyeshna b'makom hasar v'shelo b'makom sar, because that applies both in the area where hair grows and also in an area where hair does not grow, and so therefore that's included by women as well as men. Umotzi anias hakarcha, but I exclude karcha, I exclude the tearing out of the hair, she'ena ela b'makom sar, because that only applies in an area where there is hair, and therefore that is limited to men and not to women. But the Gemara continues, Veima bonim v'lo bonos bein lakarcha bein legedida. But maybe I can say that sons and not daughters, that applies whether we're talking about the tearing out of the hair or the cutting of the skin. V'chi kasav ki am kadosh atol Hashem Elokechem, when it says ki am kadosh to include men and women, b'srita hu dichsev, maybe that's by srita, and to that the Gemara says, kasavar isi holds srita u gedida, that when it comes to srita and gedida, those are really the same thing. So you can't say that one of them applies to, that gedida, let's say, applies to men and not to women, but srita applies to both men and women. You can't say that gedida and srita are identical, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph.